Yeah, so it's just going to be like a common space where we can just like, hash some ideas together, exchange thoughts, and then hopefully we can get some productive discussions out of this. Always nice to kind of like put some faces to names. So I ran a quick poll on topics to discuss. So I got good votes, even though only 2 votes came in. So the first topic that we can start off, and it's a good follow-up from last week, is on the delegate transition to V4 governance. So as you all know, as you transition over to the UNX chain on Cosmos, governance is going to look very, very different, right? Like we're going to have probably validators come in and make on-chain votes, and that's probably very different from what we have today in V3 governance, where in an EVM world, all token holders and delegates can essentially vote. Come V4, it's probable that validators will kind of take on this heavy responsibility of pushing on-chain votes. So really need to think through like how delegates can kind of transition over to V4, just because like if you want to have a say on chain proposals, it's probable that you need to run your own validator. And we discussed last week that, not a lot of delegates, running a validator is actually not going to be feasible for every single delegate. So I believe Flipside and a couple of others actually posted quite a few recommendations as to how we can transition delegates over. So yeah, wanted to see if any of you guys had anything else to kind of chime in here.
Any of you validating today? Any networks, or any of you maybe are planning to be a validator? Even though it takes a bit of resources and time, but maybe some of you are ready for it?
I actually have a client at the moment that they run validators on Cosmos, on Ethereum, and a couple of other chains. I think they're in the top 10% on Cosmos, if I'm not mistaken. And I was planning actually to recommend for him to run a validator on the YDX V4 while I'm having a meeting with him next week. And I was actually planning to, this week, contact you guys to see how best to go about it, if there's any requirements before having the validator introduction. So I think it's all about using people maybe in our network that are into running validators on other chains, and recommending to run a validator on the YDX V4 maybe as well.
I think with a little bit of patience, we should get more information about the full requirement for being a validator. Mm-hmm. The testnet is kind of around the corner, if not within a few weeks only. And by the time there will be the public testnet, and I guess some validator will join, and some of them are quite sizable business. So I'm sure they're going to be offering white label solutions, which, if you're able to bring the minimum level of the YDX token needed, can be easily for you to kind of get started, and then trying to rally as many people coming and stake with you to support your voice on the ecosystem. I think it's good to start thinking about it. Do we have all the information we need yet? Probably not, but it's definitely coming our way. So we just have to be a little bit more patient here. But if you look at the people which have been public about their participation in the public testnet, in the private testnet, and probably in the public testnet as well, I'm sure there will be white label solutions. And maybe, yes, that's something the foundation might explore. It's very early. We need to consider a lot of things, legal and other things, but possibly supporting like further decentralization on the network. So if some of you are running specific validators in specific geographies, it might be in the interest of the DYDX ecosystem to get like kind of validators ignited or ignite by the foundations or some other people from the ecosystem to help them get started in some part of the world and help in getting a sufficient decentralization from the get-go. I think we've seen that with some other foundations, so I can't promise anything to anyone, but that's something we will be kind of monitoring and trying to coordinate either stakeholders or anyone who can help to support people who wants to get started and who have a kind of a contribution beyond being a validator only to the ecosystem. or maybe an audience within a geography of interest for the ecosystem in general.
Yep, for sure. Thanks, Charles. I think on the tooling front, it's also worth exploring what governance tooling is actually out there that can kind of simulate the delegate experience that we have today. So I'm not sure if you've seen sending a link through on the Google Meets chat, but we've had this validator actually create this UI called Resolute, and it essentially runs the OffZ functionality, the OffZ transaction to imitate like a delegation experience. So yeah, I guess like, this is one potential way where we can literally transpose the entire delegation experience. So in that world, what would happen would be a stake token holder would essentially choose a delegate address, so any DYD exchange address, to delegate their to authorize, that's the right term to use, to authorize the voting powers to them, the decision to make vote calls to them, and then they can actually specify over what time period and on what specific parameters as well. So this is a pretty good like start to thinking about what tools are out there that can facilitate delegation in a Cosmos world. And yeah, if you guys actually chance upon any other UIs or any other tools, please feel free to kind of post them on the forums, because it's always good to see what's out in the market today and see what we can potentially incentivize through grants to build out. I guess like the previous topic is actually a pretty good segue to the next one. So one option on the poll was to explore initiatives to on-ramp validators onto DYDX governance to get them familiar with the ecosystem and dynamics, just because, again, they're going to be a brand new stakeholder when it comes to governance in V4. So any initial ideas as to how we can, bridge validators to potentially delegates like yourself, or get them more familiar with the ecosystem, get them more familiar with governance? A couple of them have actually started posting their profiles, but there hasn't been like a clear next step as to how we can kind of bring them in closer, to be more familiar with the ecosystem. Do you guys think like, maybe we can set up meetings with validators to, understand what they're interested in and potentially bridge them to endorsed delegates? That's something that I guess like Foundation would be happy to kind of facilitate. And then, you guys
That's
can.
a good idea, Cliff, right? Like so that endorsed delegates get a better understanding of what these validators are, what they're interested in over and above a forum post, which is very helpful, but it could help whether it's a digital or personal event. And to me, I think they're really important groups to connect with each other. As endorsed delegates, as all of you guys are, it's you probably have a raft of questions, or you want to try and scope out what these guys are interested in, how they operate, how much they care about governance, what the incentives could be for you. So I don't know what you guys think as endorsed delegates, but it seems to me like it's a pretty valuable idea.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, doing some sort of meet the delegates. So it would be meet the validator or something like that. And also on the posts, I saw that there's like some sort of a template for the validators to put their information and all that. But also they're just posting it as a separate post instead of like in the delegates, for example. It's like one post for all of the delegates with that template on, and each delegate just posts on that post. You know what I mean? The way that is right now on the forum is like a little bit chaotic. They're all posting separately, so I think it would be a good idea as well just to condense them on into one, and also do the meet the validator series, for example.
That makes sense. That's an idea, or potentially we can come up with like a ongoing database as well, where we consolidate all of these validator information into one common database, instead of it going in one single thread. Just because like if it's one single thread, then those in the middle would probably be kind of left out. So yeah, maybe we can use all the different aspects of the framework as filters, and then maybe delegates can see, okay, I'm interested in potentially meeting with validators in specific regions or who have experience validating certain chains, and then that's kind of like how you can find out which delegate or which validators actually align with you guys more, and vice versa, right? So maybe we can do this for like the endorsed delegates as well. Maybe we can come up with a framework to really tag endorsed delegates based on their subject matter experts, their expertise, their interests, and then from these two databases, people can kind of filter and then find people who they align with and then make connections that way. Have any of you had any experiences working with some of the huge validators in Cosmos land? So like ones that I can think of are like Figment, Chorus One. Have you guys actually had the chances to work with them, understand like what their practices are, and bridging them to existing community leaders like yourself would be a valuable exercise, and then we can take it from there. Cool. Before we move on,
maybe just a question from Vladimir before we move on, Cliff.
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed out on the chat. So Vladimir asked, what is the minimal amount of DYDX tokens to run a validator? So that is something that we're going to get more details on. We don't have a clear number on that yet. So yeah, just we will definitely keep the forums updated, and all of our comms will definitely point to that blog post once that's out from DYDX Trading or from any other entity that decides to release that information. Yeah, David, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I guess just one thought or idea on my side. Obviously, validators are going to be an extremely important kind of part of the architecture for V4, not only participating kind of in consensus, but also running the order book and matching engine in memory, but also participating in governance. I think it's probably realistic for us to expect, a pretty diverse set of validators, like coming from different types of backgrounds and experiences and levels of comfort with kind of those three major functionalities. I think for this group in particular that is kind of more focused on governance, I do know that there's quite a few of these like larger validators that also provide kind of transparency reports around how they participate in governance. I think in particular, like Chorus, I think it's Chorus One has a pretty extensive kind of report and guidelines on how they engage on votes kind of more broadly. It may be worth kind of this collective group to also spend time going through the existing list of validators who have shown intent to participate in kind of V4 and see what kind of information is available or already published relative to governance. I think there's probably some interesting insights in those reports that would just help inform this group in particular around opportunities to get involved or help upskill validators more broadly on the governance side of things.
Thanks, David. I just want to point out something that Craig is saying on the chat. So he said that, sorry, I'm out of office, so without audio, I would definitely like a consolidation of the existing data. I think we could then work on extending this to further understand the differences between the validators. What do they each specialize in? What is important when deciding on a validator, especially on Cosmos? Okay, cool. I will take that as an actionable for the foundation to work on. So I will consolidate all of this information and post it as a public database that everyone can access. Charles, go ahead, please.
Yeah, maybe one thought for this group and the foundation is definitely here to help on this as well, is as you kind of structure the group of delegates for version 4, I really invite you to keep an eye on diversity of this group, making sure it represents as many geographies as possible, possibly genders. It's just going to be creating a flywheel effect where people feel the community is welcoming people from really many different backgrounds, many different parts of the world, many different ethnicities. So it should not be like a first things to do, but keep doing an effort so that anyone from Asia, anyone from South America, anyone from some other part of the world which are not kind of mainstream in our industry yet feel welcome and pay some extra effort. It's just it pays off in terms of personal satisfaction and as well in terms of community. So we probably want to get inspirations from the OG networks around us, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some others, which have been really working from the early days at welcoming people from the edge of the community and essentially kind of grow the community via this trailblazer coming to the community. So keep this in mind. I think it's something which we make some effort on at the foundation, and if some of other groups within the ecosystem are also aligned with that, it's just extremely rewarding, and it's just amplify and make your practice or make your group working 24/7 and bringing the best talents around. So that's something I keep in mind personally on many things we build at the foundation.
Yeah, just a quick point there. A lot of validators actually do post their governance frameworks on their blogs or on their own websites. So I've sent quite a few from Carswan, from Citadel, as well as from Figment. So it's interesting that they are committed to being so transparent around their processes. I guess it brings about assurances, and that's something that we can put out as a best practice potentially for validators to share as well when they create their profiles, and something that we can include in the database for community members like yourself to kind of view when deciding you potentially might want to stake your tokens to validate the chain.
One question I have for you guys, delegates, how can we make sure this group stays motivated and keeps growing? How many % of you are being compensated in some shape or form for your delegates' work, and how many of you are kind of volunteer, and do you have some learnings or suggestion to make this type of contribution to the ecosystem sustainable?
Well, I'm an endorsed delegator, but I started off from zero. So it was basically an initiative of the ambassador program on the governance bureau that was not incentivizing, but was promoting the delegates to become a delegate, and also was part of some of the tasks of can't remember the name. It was Web3 crew, I think. And it was just incentivizing, and not incentivizing per se, but it was just gamifying the process, I guess. Also was very helpful. The course, Alucard, I think, created a course for how to become a delegate. That was also very very good to know what was going to be like to be a delegate, and what was the responsibilities and all that. And for my experience, that was it. That's what made me become an endorsed delegate. Then after that, I got tokens from A16Z. Also, there was supposed to be compensation, but for now there's no compensation. But it was not for the compensation. It was more to be part of the community and have a say. And because before that it was maybe 1,000 or 2,000 tokens delegated or so, and it was practically nothing. It was more community driven. We were all coming up together as a community, talking. Let's say, okay, what can we do with this or whatever. And it was more of a coming up together for the vote. But now that I have these tokens delegated to me, it's also the same thing. It's also that community that we all group together and talk about the proposals or whatever. But it makes the difference that we have more delegated tokens, so we have more of a say in the governance process. So that was really good. But for the future, for in terms of how to promote getting more endorsed delegates on board, I don't know what to say. for what worked for me was exactly what happened, what I've just said before, the ambassador program, the promoting it, doing more events, maybe like the poker tournaments was also good, maybe to try and have some sort of a chat or something so we can chat along as we play or something, or the bingo night, or the some sort of events, things like that, and then try and promote it that way, or I don't know. To be honest, I don't know, but for what worked was that. So that's what I have to say for that.
Thank you.
I think this is providing even a bit more clarity in regard to the obligations of an endorsed delegate could be very beneficial, because right now, I mean, there is public information, but maybe it's not publicized enough. So people who are actually or want to have a say within the ecosystem could be further incentivized by virtue of that clarity that is provided in relation to how you act as an endorsed delegate, the obligations you have, maybe the liability you have, so you know the pros and the cons. And obviously, if you have liability, you need to be compensated, because there is a lot of talk, even with, I think even A16s themselves in the delegate agreements, they do actually have a waiver of liability. So I think providing more clarity in general always, I think, serves to provide a certain level of confidence and provide a certain level of increased participation in the program, I would say. Because I do not see myself, and I stand to be corrected here, a lot of new people actually applying to be endorsed delegates. But I could be mistaken. I do not follow that avidly, this particular area. But I think providing more clarity and publicizing a bit more, you know, conducting workshops of how the application process was, the requirements that need to be met, whether it was any screening, due diligence, etc. I think people that are more aware of what they need to go through will be more willing to apply. That's my personal take on it.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that? Are you referring to, like, when you say more information and more clarity, is that more like info about how a given delegate participates in governance and how they're acting, or like more transparency with respect to the like onboarding process, as well as kind of like the expectations and like code of conduct per se of like being a delegate?
I think it's a bit of both, no? So, for example, I think we had discussed this on the forums a couple of weeks or even months now back, that, for example, even implementing a module or even something public that is non-binding, but that would be used. I think Bristol Blockchain actually uses it, though, where they actually explain the reasoning as to why they voted yes or no on a proposal, for example, would increase transparency. So that's with regards to the transparency requirements. With regards to the onboarding process and stuff like that, I think there is information already on the documentation, but not a lot of people are aware of it, or are aware of it. So you have to look it up. And I think for new people that enter an ecosystem, they do not have a large token holding, but at the same time, they have valid points to make, and they want to have a say within the ecosystem. If they're aware of the onboarding process, both maybe from a legal perspective with regards to due diligence, and the onboarding process even in relation to the security you need to have in the particular wallet that you have delegated tokens to, I think if they're more aware of these circumstances surrounding being an endorsed delegate, more people will be willing to apply and become endorsed delegates. That's, again, my personal take on it.
Gotcha. I think on the flip side of that, so there is like a code of conduct, like an optional one that we released when we, you know, crafted kind of the delegate like onboarding experience. And I think where we ultimately landed was it was better to leave it as optional, more of like best practices instead of something that could be enforced, just because it's hard, I think, without, you know, when you're not compensating people, to expect them to adhere to like 90% participation, as well as to post kind of their opinions and views on every vote that they participate in, or every time that there's like an active DRC on the forum. I'm just curious, like, do you think kind of like adherence to like certain participation thresholds or like other requirements is something that would make the program stronger right now, or do you think it should stay like optional?
I think that's a very good point. In the call we had with Matt Losquadro, actually, he did make reference to people in certain councils. I forgot the name at the moment, but if they do not have a certain level of activity, they get automatically removed from that particular committee or council. So I think having a performance-based sort of threshold that you need to pass to be able to maintain your role is important. At the same time, as you said, it could be difficult to enforce. Why? If A16Z delegated tokens to, as Alex said, to Alex, it could be difficult for the DYDX Foundation or the DYDX community to sort of infringe on that relationship and enforce its own code of conduct on that particular legal relationship. So I think having a non-binding code of conduct, but a code of conduct that anyone can actually sort of work with is a good step. At the same time, maybe reaching out to certain companies, VCs, whatever they may be, and maybe advising or initiating certain talks in relation to putting in or amending certain delegation agreements and putting in a participation clause that they need to, for example, reach an 80% threshold of participation per quarter, for example, on proposals. I think that would be beneficial. So I think these talks have to be had with the persons delegating the tokens, which for large delegations are normally VCs. So I think if we start there, that's a very good first step. And then obviously, you have a non-binding code of conduct that, sets out principles and motivations, and you have mechanics such as publicizing why you voted yes or no. I think there are simple solutions, but very effective ones that could be done.
Just on that note, I guess, are people familiar with Show Karma? It's kind of a dashboard that tracks all of the people that have received kind of delegate tokens, and then they track performance in terms of on-chain proposal votes, snapshot votes, and then participation on Commonwealth and more recently Discourse. And it's easy to kind of filter for endorsed delegates and other delegates in kind of the ecosystem more broadly. Is that a tool that people A, are familiar that exists, and B, has anyone actually used that in kind of a substantial manner?
Personally, I really like the tool. I think even on a previous community town hall we had, I had mentioned that it's a very effective tool and that there's a lot of data that they're collecting. But I think we need to start using that data more effectively. For example, you reach a certain level of participation threshold, you get incentivized in some way, shape, or form, be it the IDX tokens, USDC, or maybe an increase in voting power attributed to that particular wallet. Again, these need to be researched in these particular areas, so I'm just spitballing at the moment. But I think Karma is a very good tool that I would suggest that we start leveraging a lot more, especially to assess governance participation, to maybe enforce governance participation with regards to endorsed delegates. So I agree, David. I think Karma is a very good tool that maybe we need to start researching more, or even working with the Karma team on how to basically optimize it for the IDX on V4.
For sure. Maybe it makes sense for us to make a push campaign to drive more people towards Show Karma again. I think it got built out December last year, and then people just started forgetting about it. So maybe it makes sense to kind of always push the community to look through all of the delegates and what their participation rates are on Show Karma. Cool. I guess this is also a good segue to the next topic that was on the poll, and that is, should we actually be thinking about certain delegate discovery initiatives to increase visibility on smaller delegates, right? So I'm pretty sure that you guys are familiar with how the landscape of delegation is in DYDX. We have a lot of active delegates like yourself that unfortunately don't get a lot of delegated voting and proposing powers, despite how active you guys are. So I think it's worth thinking through what are some potential delegate discovery initiatives. And this is something that is troubling the whole optimism ecosystem as well. So the optimism ecosystem is actually one that I follow closely for all things governance related. I think they're pioneering a lot of good governance practices, and they similarly are thinking through how they can increase visibility for smaller active delegates. So some tools that we can probably leverage include Show Karma, where we can potentially include a DAO contribution score and then play around with the filters to show all the more active delegates that actually have maybe less than 0.1% of all voting power. So yeah, outside of that, anything else you guys can kind of think about from an initiative standpoint to kind of increase visibility? Before we go on there, Vladimir said in the chat that it is crucial for delegates to communicate to the community why they voted a certain way, and these metrics should be visible to individuals who potentially want to delegate tokens. The quantity of votes in which a delegate participated is not as important as the reasoning behind their votes. This way, people will understand the delegate's perspective. Great point. Sorry, David, I cut you off.
So, I mean, yeah, unless people have ideas, like, I think in the past, we had helped organize some like AMAs with endorsed delegates and trying to kind of create more brand awareness around that. I believe that was like an ambassador-driven program, but that was, I think, a good way to help elevate individual profiles within the ecosystem and then talk about kind of people's own contributor journey and help kind of put a face or voice to a forum name. I'm curious if people thought those were successful, if that was a good idea and something that we should potentially reconsider in some way, shape, or form.
I'd be supportive of restarting that initiative. I think, yeah, it was run by, I think it was MX, NT, and I want to say Andy.
Andy, yeah.
Lememe. And Lememe, that's right. Yeah, I mean, if anyone's keen to support that initiative, I'm sure me and Cliff can help get set up and kick that off as well. So yeah, I'll be keen to support starting that back up. I think also, just to touch back on Show Karma, two things. Like, one is they're actually looking to create some machine learning to measure contribution by quality. I don't know what weights they're actually utilizing there, but they've created some form of machine learning that allows you to be, I guess, like rated by the quality of forum posts and DRCs, etc. And then lastly, I think they're similar to Agora. I do think they have like a description tab on their site, which allows you to almost just give yourself almost like characteristics on like voting behavior, description, bit of history, etc. So it might be worth trying to re-showcase that a little bit further for the community as well.
For sure. Yeah, I speak quite often separately with the Show Karma team, just thinking through how we can measure quality of contributions, just because we don't want people who just spam the forums be seen as someone who's a quality contributor. So maybe other parameters like, how many of your replies actually get likes or how many of your posts actually do get replies. These are other potential forms of gauges to quality. But yeah, they're working on a machine learning algorithm to kind of gauge what quality kind of looks like. And I think they will be releasing that pretty soon. Vladimir again chimed in saying, I would like to see university delegates as well, as they possess a significant amount of voting power, but currently they do not seem to actively participate in the community. Yeah, unfortunately, I would have to agree with that. Not all of them actively participate. I think like Penn blockchain is actually one of the most active ones, but everyone else is actually pretty silent on the forums and on the votes as well. Yeah, so maybe it makes sense to kind of like host a Meet the Delegate series again, have them on board for an episode and explain like, what their motivations are, what their plans are for DYDX governance, and the community can kind of gauge whether they would want to continue delegating their tokens to them or not. Before I forget, just because we moved forums from Commonwealth over to the discourse, a lot of the endorsed delegates profiles actually did not successfully migrate over, and that's because like we didn't do like a massive copy and paste. We wanted to make sure that delegates felt comfortable in recreating their own profile. So again, it's a call to action. If you guys are keen, please go ahead and post your profiles there. And on our end, I guess like since we're already doing it for the validators, maybe it makes sense again to come up with like a common database for all of the endorsed delegates. Include interest, include subject matter expertise, and then use those as filters that the community can kind of use to identify delegates that they align with.
I have this idea. This represents my personal opinion here only, but I'm just thinking and looking at crypto communities a little bit like some societies are getting structures around democracy and all these things. And there is some countries, maybe some of you live in those countries, where essentially you get fined if you don't participate in the elections. And there is here some kind of token economics, even though there is no tokens in those countries, saying, okay, you need to be a good citizen, and there is some standards. And if you're part of our nation, you need to vote. And if you don't vote, we fine you. I don't think finding people is a right way, but we can definitely say, okay, if you, for example, and this might be part of a roadmap of the delegate programs, when more information gets available and see how things are getting shape and something to push or not push, or something coming our way eventually via some other communities or ideas we kind of borrow from outside. But the idea being that good citizens get extra rewards. So let's say if you stake your tokens on the DYD exchange at the time, and if the community decides that there is some rewards for that, let's take the assumption your rewards will be 1%. If you're passively just, so to say, milk the protocol, just securing the protocol without taking care of what's happening there exactly. But if you're a good citizen and you define what means a good citizen, maybe voting at 80% of the votes and participating to certain levels, your validators or your token will essentially get some extra rewards. So maybe the base rewards will be 1% and the good citizens will get like 125, 150%, just by being engaged with the community and not just passively staking. So that's a on all these kind of things, but this can also help at some point within, after several steps of the redesign of delegates, making sense for some people, saying, okay, if my tokens are in the right hands, I might be able to get some extra rewards because I will essentially maybe share the responsibility of being engaged with the delegate. And this delegate will do the research. This delegate is aligned with my values, my vision for the protocol. It's the same way you vote for maybe your some regional representative or city representative in your respective countries, right? Those guys usually get compensation in some shape or way. So it comes back to my earlier remarks, like how can we make it sustainable and scalable? And finding a way that so that it provides some benefits when you vote, and the delegate services becomes like a non-brainer. Again, that's my personal opinion here. Maybe it's the timing of this kind of conversations is very, very important, but something to kind of consider. Yeah, and you can social shame and point finger at people not voting. Thank you, Josh. In Canada, they've got they experiment so much already. We have to learn a lot. And the French guy is telling you that, so it means a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea personally. I think there are always two ways of incentivization, right? There's positive incentivization and negative. The fine you mentioned is a form of negative incentivization, which means, okay, if I don't vote, I get a fine. So I'm incentivized to vote. Positive incentivization is if I vote, I get a reward. Now, for example, I think Compound had tried to implement like a proof of voting NFT. So with every vote that your wallet actually participates in, you get an NFT representing your vote. Sort of similar to POAPs, I would say, like a proof of active participation within the protocol. But yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting ways to do it, different iterations. On Cosmos, it's yet to be seen, I think. I haven't seen anything similar to it on Cosmos personally.
It's a complex architecture, right? And we don't know exactly if the validators are only the voice of the token holders, or if there is like this kind of plugins or add-on are really like ready for prime time or only experimental yet. But yes, maybe starting with NFTs rewards is a good way to see if it's getting kind of attention, and see if this can escalate later on with some kind of financial rewards in some shape or form. Yeah.
I have kind of a random question stemming off what Charles just said. I think I always go back to thinking about like, are delegates kind of well positioned to have kind of broad freedom to engage with any, subject matter, any type of proposal, and like provide their own opinion on it? Or do we think it's potentially more beneficial to have delegates like specialize and then have no expectation that they participate in other forms of subject matter? I think like there's a fair amount of like writing about that, about like, you know, is it wrong to force delegates to kind of participate in every DRC governance post, or is it better to have like really experienced delegates, only like a handful that are like super in the weeds to, you know, issue kind of like almost public expert opinions for people, to have like a better understanding of their positions? Would be curious to hear everyone's thoughts here about kind of the differences between those two models. I think like from my perspective, when you have like the broad mandate, obviously, I don't think you have as much participation. I think like if you look back at the types of votes that we've had on V3 so far, you know, quite typically when you have votes like LP rewards, for example, generally like the participation base is like market makers, and I think it's difficult for certain delegates to like put themselves in the position of a market maker just because it's like a foreign position to them. Whereas when you have things like, you know, something that is more topical for governance, let's say like the grants program or the ops trust, generally you get more participation from delegates. So I'm wondering what you guys think of like the two different models, and like if we're kind of on the right track right now or it should be changed.
My idea will be let the market do. Let's say you and let's say immutable lawyer wants to create like a mini group of delegates, and you build a team around you, and you, Josh, is the engineer, so for everything technical you will be the reference point, and maybe for everything more complicated in governance, immutable lawyer will be the reference point. And suddenly you don't choose a delegate as one individual, but maybe the market dynamics will make delegates saying, okay, we are a group of 4 people, this is our profiles, and we are happy to receive delegation from people from the outside. And if there is token economics, suddenly you create like a mini governance team. But maybe some other delegates will remain like individuals, and they will say on these specific questions it was very technical. I consulted with another delegate which is technical, and I decided to follow his recommendation. So on behalf of my token holders, I will be voting in this direction. I will say let the market express itself here. But I would not be surprised if some people are becoming more and more professional, especially if there is token, if there is incentive in voting. I would be super comfortable personally to delegate to a team where there is a variety of knowledge and rather than one individual only.
How would you implement it though, Joshua, from an implementation perspective? Again, I know it's just a high level idea, but I think with regards to implementation, I can't sort of, I agree with your point though, that having specific endorsed delegates that have a specific skill set, and you know that delegates will be making informed decisions on governance votes. That's a very good idea. But how would it be implemented, sort of? Is it a delegate bio that would determine their skill set or communicate their skill set?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I didn't really think it through. I'm sort of falling right now. I think like, yeah, bio and also just like sweat equity, right? Like somebody proving that they have specific kind of expertise that they can leverage and share with the ecosystem. I think like where I was headed in the back of my mind is, you know, when we were doing kind of like comp research, the governance team anyways at the foundation, we looked at the potential to have like subject matter specific delegation, which I don't think anybody has done yet, which is like quite surprising. And like specifically what I mean is like, so for delegates right now, it's like I delegate 100% of my tokens or a certain percentage of my tokens to, let's say, Cliff, which is great. And then he gets my voting and proposing power. But I think like one of the things that we were exploring is like, wouldn't it be even better if I could select, let's say, 3 delegates, and then with my stake weight, I delegate to Cliff for issues involving, you know, the community treasury. For risk parameters, I delegate 100% of my stake weight to 0xCLR. For any subject matter that involves like software updates, I delegate my full stake weight to, you know, another delegate who's more competent, like reviewing code and engineering. And, you know, it's something that we considered is like, is it worth, like, is there actual benefit in having like these specialist groups versus just like broad level opinion that represent like the rest of the community. And I think like still don't have like a firm answer there, but like interesting thought project.
Yeah, I think I stand to be corrected here, but I had worked with Gitcoin like last year or the year prior on their token specifically, and I do not know if they have something similar with regards to the Steward Council. In fact, I was looking it up, but I couldn't find it exactly. But they do have something similar where you can delegate to subject matter specific experts, and they'd be your steward with regards to that particular subject matter. I stand to be corrected because I haven't looked at their documentation for over a year now. Just by looking at a Google search, they even have like stewards health cards. So the level of participation they've had along throughout certain governance proposals, the reasoning in those governance proposals. Again, I'll have to look at it and communicate either via the forum or on Discord. But yeah, maybe worth looking into.
I think this is where like having that common database will be super helpful. So once we have that built out, maybe we can run campaigns, or maybe the community can form a working group to say, okay, this new proposal is in the pipeline now. This is in whatever category, and then these are all the endorsed delegates, or these are all the validators with subject matter expertise in that particular category. So you can reconsider like redelegating your tokens to the subject matter experts. I guess like from an implementation front, this is something that we can explore. Cool. We only have 4 minutes left. Really appreciate the very constructive back and forth. So I just sent a link to claim the POAP for today's session. Secret word is Armani, just because even though I was spotting an Armani shirt. So Craig said, I think in most decisions here, the market should decide. The forum can help make that more efficient through making information available. Yep, agreed. Cool. So yeah, David, go ahead, please.
Right, just one more question going back to like the incentive comment. Agreed, there's positive incentives and negative incentives. I think so far we've largely relied, at least for everything governance or voting, on like non-cash incentives. I think today, I believe on like Crew 3 or whatever the new name is, there you can gain kind of XP for participating in governance in some way, shape, or form, which ultimately you can get some free swag that way. The other idea that came up was like a co-op for actually voting. I don't think we've actually experimented with that in the past. I think there's interesting research on incentivizing governance participation and like the pros and cons of that. I'm curious if anyone has kind of any thoughts on other ways that we could try to experiment around incentivizing turnout, at least for either snapshot votes or on-chain votes more broadly.
Cool. Thanks, David. Okay, cool. I think we can end off today's session. Again, really appreciate everyone chiming in with your thoughts. Thought it was a super productive session. James, go ahead quickly. Oh, sorry. I think you meant to raise create an emoji. Yeah, all good, all good. Yeah, cool. So this session is recorded, and we will post it on the Foundation's YouTube page as well as on the discourse post once it's ready. Thanks again, everyone. None of this has been financial advice, and please go ahead and claim your POAPs. Again, secret word is Armani. So yeah, looking forward to the next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lifton. Bye-bye.
Bye.